listening to She Rises, a podcast dedicated to women who are ready to stop settling and start living their lives by design. If you're ready to talk about the stuff that weighs you down and get practical advice on everything from your health, body image, spirituality, relationships, and personal growth, then you're in the right place. Hello, I'm Giovanna Capozza, your host, master coach, spiritual teacher, and mind-body expert, and I'm on a mission to unsettle women all over the world. Are you ready to rise? Hello, welcome to the show. I'm here with Lisa Berkovitz. Lisa has straddled the business and spiritual worlds for over 15 years as an MBA high-level project manager for Fortune 100 and 500 companies. She's also a master-level NLP practitioner, Reiki master, and master-level coach to executives and entrepreneurs. She has extensive experience drawing out the life's work of some of the world's most visionary, passionate, and accomplished change makers. She helps them put this vision into a tangible, practical form so that it can finally make its intended impact in the world and do so with less effort and more flow in the deepest alignment with who they are on the planet. I'd like to welcome to the show Lisa Berkovitz. Thanks for being here, Lisa.
Thank you, Giovanna. So great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. You are definitely a soul sister, and I can't wait to dive into your story, especially these worlds that you straddled, as you mentioned on your website. And let's just dive right in and just get into the meat of it. I'm so curious to know a little bit more about your role in executive leadership and how that led you to what you're doing now, which is really kind of the blending of two worlds, but these two seemingly diverse things, this spiritual executive as you were. So I'd love to know more about that.
For sure. Yeah. Well, like most people's journeys, mine was, evolving one step to the next without quite knowing why and how. So when I started, when I was back in corporate and doing the project management work, I had, I was doing really well, advancing quickly, easily could have gone down that road fully and committed myself to it. And I came to the point where I was just too passionate about human potential. I would stay late at work and research things, and back in the day, it wasn't even like, because I left corporate in 1999, so it's been a while now, and it wasn't even like, everybody had a computer at home. I used to do tons of research, and I ended up somehow, I'm thinking back to what one of the catalysts was, but I used to, when I was, I always had this really good radar for things that, like my intuition was always really strong. And I ended up in a retreat, a self-mastery retreat in Costa Rica. I'd come across this tiny little ad in the back of a magazine that said self-mastery in the rainforest. And it was like 2 lines. It was super short. And I just knew I was supposed to go. And I was early stages back then. I'd had my heart broken. I had been in personal development for years already, through since university and all the way through my corporate career. I was into personal development. But in the last few years before I left corporate, I had my heart broken. And that's really what put me on my spiritual path. So when I saw this little ad, I went to this retreat in the rainforest, and it turned out to be, a deeply spiritual retreat. And I had this vision when I got there that I was there for a week, and I had this vision of traveling the world, supporting human potential, whatever that meant. I didn't know what that meant at the time. And I basically just quit. I gave notice, and like a couple of months later, I was gone. And it was really, a lot of people didn't understand. A lot of people were surprised, but it just felt so right. And then, I walked away from great income. I traveled a ton. I had lots of responsibility, and it was ever increasing. And there was a pathway for me forward into executive leadership, but it didn't have the joy for me. So I left, and my spirituality deepened and deepened over the time that I left. I traveled a lot. I studied a lot. was freelance to corporate for a bunch of years. And one of my main clients, I used to help design and redesign their sales training programs with the head of training. And I found out at that time, he was a super creative, amazing guy, super creative type. And I found out then that I was really gifted at listening between the lines and hearing what wasn't being said necessarily. And I would take all his ideas and give them shape and form into these sales training programs. And I did that for 6 years, and it was an amazing partnership. I did executive coaching at that time in that same period. And I had sort of discovered in that phase after leaving corporate, that chunk of years as a freelancer, that I had this gift, this intuitive gift where I could hear and see between the lines, and I could help organize what was flowing through, because he actually loved his work. He was a super creative, super entrepreneurial type at the head of this corporate division. And somehow that was where I really discovered that I had this gift to hold space for someone who's downloading and give shape and form to what their life's work really is, because he poured his heart and soul into what he trained about. And that was kind of the beginning. Yeah, it was the beginning of lots more.
I want to go back. I want to go back to that, because I'm listening to this, and I'm listening to it also from the ear of who potentially might also be listening in. And I know, because I've had pivotal moments in my life as well, where there was such a strong, you can't explain it, direction, let's call it, to go in a particular direction. And I know there's been times where I've heeded that and it served me well. And there's times that I've ignored it. And so I want to go back to that moment, because you were obviously already in, like you said, the personal development world. You had gone to this retreat, and you have this vision or this insight that this was the new direction of your life. And I would love for you to speak a little bit more to that, and to that level of trusting that, because so many women and even men that are listening to this are going to resonate with that. They're going to resonate with I've had that moment, and they may have followed through with it and they may have not, but there's such a key component there of a trust factor. And I wonder if you can explore that a little more with us, just so we can help those people listening who might be resonating with that story a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I come from the perspective that we all know what's right for us at all times. We just may or may not be paying attention. And I had already had these clues. I was already staying late studying these things that I really wanted to study, because my job started getting in the way of that. So when that moment hit, when I was in the rainforest, and I saw the vision, and I just knew in my body that it was the direction I needed to go in. And I would say for me, that trust, I actually thought, I'll be in transition for 6 months and figure out where I go next, what my next step is. And I just had sort of a lighthearted attitude towards it. I know I'm supposed to go in this direction. I can feel it in my body, and I'm just gonna follow it. And it was a knowing, it was a trust and a knowing that so I didn't have a lot of fear around it at the time. I've made other leaps that had more fear, but at the time I didn't think it was going to be such a big and long journey as it ended up being. I just kind of jumped in with both feet. So I'd say I've done it both ways. I've done it kind of hands up in the air, wee, I'm going to jump in. And I've done it in the other way, where it's a little more thought out beforehand, like, oh, am I really going in the right direction? But ultimately, I would say every single one of us really does know what's true for us. And when I haven't listened to that, in that particular case, in that story, I just went for it. But in the times that I have delayed, it has never worked out for me. There's always been something that either I got exhausted, or I had things didn't flow well. I believe life gives us signs, and if you're not paying attention to the signs, then they get louder. Mm-hmm. And that's been, my experience. So I do the best I can to listen and act as early as I can, so that the wake up call doesn't have to come. It doesn't have to come with a 2x4 to the head, as some people
Exactly.
say.
Yeah. I remember Oprah saying years ago, first you get a whisper, then you get a nudge,
exactly.
and then you get a brick on the head, and you don't want to wait till that point. And that resonates so much with me as well on my journey, and the times where I've, delayed or procrastinated listening to that whisper, it got louder and louder and louder. And unfortunately, you're right. There's been circumstances where, whether it was a life circumstance or a health issue or something that just blew up on my behalf, I'm going to say now. At the time, it did not feel like it was on my behalf.
Totally.
But it does on your behalf, right? To get you to move. Amazing. So, what I hear now is that one of your biggest gifts is to hold this space for people to learn to trust this inner voice and to trust this guidance. Can you walk us through a little bit of how you do that?
Yeah, I do it through a combination of deep listening. Because again, I said before, I operate on the assumption that the clues are there, right? So I ask questions so that I can hear what that, depending on the person and depending what the situation is and maybe the change that they want to make, I listen. I ask questions about that, and I listen for what they say. And it never fails that in what they share with me, there are the clues to what is really true for them. It never fails. Everybody knows what's true for them. So I ask good questions. I invite them to share in a space of safety and non-judgment. And when I hear something that lights up, so I use my intuition a lot. And when I hear something that is said, or I hear something between the lines that maybe is not said, and so I need to inquire about it a little more, I can sense what has aliveness to it. And for me, aliveness is the hallmark of the soul. Aliveness, joy, where there's energy to something. When I hear that in what someone's saying, then I will reflect it back to them. And it basically works like them having permission to have that which they reveal to themselves, really, as having a spark, having aliveness, having truth to it for them, because that's really for me what it's about. I'm listening for the soul's blueprint, and the soul's blueprint speaks to me through the energy and the words that they use that have energy on it. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. And it just sort of leads me to that whole idea that, as coaches, that's our primary job, right? Is that deep listening. And so many of us have really just stopped listening to ourselves and to our own heart's song, or as you call it, your soul blueprint, right? That piece of us that knows at a deep, deep level. Yes. So what's one of the biggest challenges you find with some of the people you work with? Because I could imagine you work with some amazing visionaries and maybe some people that still have their toe in the corporate world or just coming out of that. What are the biggest challenges you find? Yeah.
They're pretty consistent. Everyone has their own story, but they're pretty consistent. I would say trusting their own guidance, their own intuition, if they have an idea, something that they want to do, even if they already have a business and they're doing well in it, which many of my clients do, there's always a next level of expression, a next level of being used by life for the role that you're here for. And so I see a lot of doubt, a lot of fear. I mean, in terms of the obstacles, right? Sort of really, should I go in this direction? Is this the right direction? Can I make enough money at that is a big one. So trusting the guidance. And I would say letting go of letting the mind lead. So, in my business, my tagline is let soul lead. And so distinguishing between the mind and the soul, that seems to be a big one. Something sounds really good and logical, but it's not actually the soul's truth. So there's a lot of discernment that happens around that. And a lot of permission required to have more fun, to actually let it be easier, let it be fun. That I feel like I'm sort of a champion for the soul in that if it's not alive, if it's not fun, if there isn't ease, and you're only doing it because you think that's the marketable way, or it's even maybe in a blind spot, don't even realize they're doing it an old way and there is another way because that would be easier. So I would say that's another one, just letting it be lighter and more fun and easier. We're so conditioned to work hard. We're so conditioned that if it's not easy, if it's not hard, it's not valuable. If it's too easy, it's boring. There are a lot of beliefs.
Right. That inner taskmaster, my coach calls it. Just sort of that person, the self-flagellating, the whipping ourselves. It doesn't work. Totally, it doesn't work, does it?
Nope, does not work.
I'm interested what you, just rewinding a little bit to what you said about discernment, because I found in my journey that was one of the things, that initially really tripped me up and still sometimes does. It's that question of is this coming from my soul? Is this coming from my inner guidance, or is this coming from somewhere else? It is until you build that muscle where you just, it's oh yeah, okay, that's it. I know that this message is for me. It's coming from there. How do you navigate that for people and help them sort of start to learn to discern that? I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that also have that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. I'm a big proponent of getting quiet. So whether you call it meditation or for some people who don't prefer that, it could be just mindfulness. It could be time in nature. It could be taking a bath or going to yoga. Everybody's different. But if there isn't time and space to listen internally, I find it's very, very difficult, much more difficult to hear the soul's truth. And so the first thing that I recommend always and that I ensure is in place at the beginning of any work I do with anybody is, what's your daily practice look like? How are you getting quiet? How are you being peaceful enough to hear what's next? Because, we've all heard soul is it whispers. It whispers. And so if there's a lot of doing and a lot of action and not enough quiet space, then it's really, really hard to discern, to hear the soul clearly. And in my experience, that's the first thing. Get quiet, do things you enjoy. That puts you in it too. Dance, go dance, or there's many, many ways. Get quiet, but also do things you love. I'd say those are the two big ones. Really make you feel like yourself. And all of a sudden you kind of know what's true for you much more easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was thinking of something too, when you were talking about the listening and the act of actually allowing that. We just busy ourselves with so much stuff. So I definitely hear that. That's something I have to make an effort. I call it my spiritual hygiene practice, where I have to schedule it in, and it has to happen, because it's easy for you to get distracted and pulled into other things and other responsibilities or to-do lists, etc. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I found, I don't know if you find this as well with your clients, I found for myself that it was this getting quiet, but I love that the reminder that it is a whisper, because it is a whisper. You have to get quiet. And one of the things that I learned in my experience is the asking for it to speak to you. Mm-hmm. How do you incorporate that, or do you incorporate that in sort of the training, without, not for lack of a better word, as they say, that you do with your clients?
Yeah, I do a lot of that, and it depends on their belief system. It could be simply sitting, if they pray to some kind of being that's important to them, asking for guidance there. Asking for help from angels or guides, asking for help from the universe, simply sitting and pondering the question, sitting with the question long enough, that will bring guidance. Whatever we focus on will come. So I do. It depends on the person. I personally ask my angels, my guides, the universe. I get signs and symbols all the time. I'm having a blast walking around the world, in dialogue with what I perceive as my support team that brings everything that I need, brings me answers, brings me alignments of different kinds. So I tailor that based on the person and kind of what's true for them.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's just such a art form almost to learn how to navigate and play with this. And we're not taught to do that, are we? Like, we're not really taught as children to have this kind of, I might use the term spiritual intelligence, or really to develop this muscle. I'm curious to know more about the work that you do with others. And could you walk us through a practical kind of guide, even if it's like a little mini guided meditation, but could you walk us through something that maybe the listeners, and if you are listening to this and you're going to be driving, do not do this while you're driving if Lisa goes into any kind of meditative thing, but could you give us a tool or something you can share with the listeners that might be able to practice at least, right? If they're not used to already doing this, but to make this real and kind of practice that listening in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be delighted for sure. If you're driving, don't do this, but I'd be delighted to do a short inner journey. You can, come back and listen later if you're in the car. But I always start with some basic energy tools. And so I'll just invite you right now to take a really comfortable seat wherever you are. And as you gently close your eyes, just bring your awareness inwardly. We spend most of the day looking out at what's happening and having things pull on us. So this is a moment here to just turn your eyes, your inner gaze towards yourself. And I would suggest just starting with 3 really slow, deep breaths. I mean, this is so, like, it's none of it rocket science, right? So if you take a nice deep breath in, consciously filling your lungs from the bottom to the very top, you can hold a moment at the top. And as you exhale, just allowing the energies that aren't serving you to leave on your out breath. Any stress energies, any busy energies. And breathing in again when you're ready, filling your lungs to the very top. Hold a moment. And as you exhale, you can just drop your shoulders, relax the muscles around your eyes, relax your scalp and your skull and your brain. And your third breath, make it the deepest breath of your day so far, filling with fresh, calm air. Hold a moment at the top. And when you're ready to exhale, just releasing and giving permission for your body to completely relax. And this alone, we're going to do a little more, but this alone, if you would just pause, turn inward and take a few conscious breaths, that immediately would settle your system and give you access to some peace. And you can imagine even now, turn your attention to the silence in this moment. So just listen for the silence that's here, because underneath even the sound of my voice is silence. There's a certain spaciousness and peace that is always present. And if you tune into that, that also has a very calming effect, but it also tunes you right into the space of beingness, just total presence. It's just peace and stillness and spaciousness. It's always here if you listen for the silence. And while you're in that silence, I would invite you to imagine standing in a place in nature, that whatever the first one is that comes to you that you love, a place that you may know. It might be an actual place, or it might just be in this moment a place that comes to your awareness that feels nurturing and calm. And you can imagine your feet touching the ground, your bare feet touching the ground in that place. So if it's on grass, you could feel the grass under your feet. If it's on the beach, you could feel the sand under your feet. whatever it is, just allowing yourself to connect with the earth. The mind, the subconscious mind, does not know if you're actually standing on the earth or if you're imagining it. And you will receive the benefit of it, the grounding effect of the earth, just by imagining it. And you can imagine like roots growing out the base of your feet, the soles of your feet, and digging down, down, down into the earth. So you have like this rootedness, this groundedness. And I like to use a grounding column as well. So you can imagine from the base of your spine, some people call it a grounding cord. I say grounding column, so it's wider, just coming down from the base of your spine, the width of your hips, down through the floor, down through the ground, into the earth. And you can imagine it heads straight down through all the layers of the earth to a place at the center of the earth where it can connect in or wrap around, like a gigantic crystal or boulder. And just let yourself feel held by the earth, grounded into the earth, and let the magnetic pull of the earth draw away all energy that isn't serving you, any stress energy, any busy, any frantic, any anxious, any fearful energy, anything at all that feels discordant. Just let it fall away. It's like the earth is sort of pulling it off you, like it has a magnetic pull that can take away these energies. And just like lighten up your field, lighten up your space, all within and all around you. Now just see how you feel. And then in that quieter space, you can usually much more easily hear yourself, hear your truth. You can sit in this space and ask a question. I mean, if you just sit in it for a few minutes, we aren't going to sit in silence here for a few minutes on the show, but you can always just take, one or all of those tools and use them to calm yourself down, settle your system, nourish yourself with some silence for even 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's all it takes. And if you have a question or you're wondering about what to do about something, you can ask in that space. And either the answer, my experience is either the answer will come in that quiet space. You might get the knowing immediately, or you can trust that it'll come at the right time. But to me, it's the most leveraged time we have. When you get quiet, it somehow affects everything else in your day. And it's just such a huge, we think about working to be more productive, working harder, working longer. It's the exact opposite. I don't know anybody who hasn't had the experience of totally not thinking about a problem and having the solution come when they're in the shower or when they're having fun somewhere, right? So it's much more productive if you have something to solve or a question mark around something for yourself, to just get quiet enough and ask the question in the quiet space, trust that the answer will be there right now, or that leveraged few minutes will bring the answer to you at the right time.
I love that. Thank you so much for that, Lisa. That was beautiful. And it's just such a great resource for those of you listening to this. You can use this on repeat, right? And just play this over, pause at the end, give yourself those few minutes of extra silence. It's funny, it's something so innate and something so easily accessible, silence, and yet it's the one thing we're in a deficiency of with our noisy world. So that was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you because I know part of your work and where your heart is with the empathic and the sensitive soul and even entrepreneur. Talk to us a little bit about empathy. How has that impacted your life, being empathic and being, a sensitive in that way? And then how have you brought that forward in your work with others?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because for those who are empaths, it's a very, very significant quality that affects a lot of things. So I was always super sensitive. I could feel everybody's energies. My way of coping with that as I was growing up was to basically isolate and avoid. And just because the energies, if energies got too harsh, I felt like I couldn't really, they felt overwhelming. I couldn't really handle them. So I would just kind of like withdraw and stay quiet. And it's particularly a challenge. I mean, in corporate, I was able to manage because I had kind of a role to play and a bit of a persona to fulfill to keep me safe, right? I fulfilled a role, and sort of my tender, sensitive self could kind of be internal and stay hidden in a way. When I left that and I became an entrepreneur, after the freelance part of my journey, when I became a full-time coach and entrepreneur in that new phase, it really became a hindrance because I would find that there were certain energies that I wanted to avoid. And so I couldn't quite allow myself to emerge fully because the coping mechanism of being an empath and feeling uncomfortable around so many energies was a big issue. And so I do work with a lot of sensitives now. And the way that I work with them, at least for myself, I'll tell you what I did for myself. And then ultimately it became what I would often share with others. I really learned, I had a teacher who taught me to manage my energy differently. And I remember she said, you are all energies. You are actually all energies. When I started shifting from being a super sensitive human being to being a more expansive spiritual being, I started to understand that from a spiritual, energetic perspective, like we're energy beings as spiritual beings. And from that perspective, there is no energy that is better or worse than any other energy. And once I started to realize that, and I took that teaching in, like you are all energies. And so it's really important that you're able to be with any of the uncomfortable energies that come up within you or that come from outside of you. And I started, gently, right? I would start by being present with my own uncomfortable feelings. And that's why, again, getting quiet, sitting in silence, or in whatever way it's good for you to kind of get quieter, as we've been talking about, and actually be with the uncomfortable feelings. I had been avoiding a bunch of them. And as I started to be with them and feel them fully, I started to find myself getting more and more free and more flexible around what I was able to do, where I was able to share myself. I could be more visible. Visibility was a big issue for me as an empath, and I work a lot with empaths around that.
That's interesting. I want to jump in for a second, Lisa, if I may.
Sure.
I think you just said something so powerful there around empaths and sensitives, because what I heard you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you finally began to understand that all energy was yours, or one, or basically relative, for lack of a better word, then there wasn't this judgment that this external energy was bad and I need to isolate myself from it or protect myself. It was just like, okay, this is another thing that I can invite in and feel, or not. But to me, that's like, wow, like that was such an awesome, like ding, 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 ding moment for me, because also being someone empathic and really as a young kid struggling like a lot, really struggling a lot with it. We kind of find our way to cope with it, but I just love the way you articulated that, because when you stop perceiving an outside attack, then there's no need to isolate anymore, and you can find your own resilience. I absolutely love that.
Yeah, thank you. You summed it up beautifully, very much so. It really is about judgment. I learned that, intrinsic in that process was realizing that judgment locks the very thing you don't want in. And so every time I judged myself, a feeling within me or an energy from outside myself, I was just perpetuating it, and it just made me want to isolate and withdraw more. So it was very liberating to realize that.
Yeah, I had a big aha moment there for me personally. That was awesome. Yeah. Go on, please.
Yeah, well, I would say that's the crux of it. And when I work with others, I basically share that and help them to get quiet enough so they bring into the space when we're working together. They can bring in any energy, and they know they can bring in any energy. So I hold the space for them to be able to be with whatever energy maybe they haven't wanted to be with before. That's part of it. And they learn, and we practice. I give them a process to actually be with the sensations that those feelings bring up in them, and to learn how to basically transmute those. But the presence, I talk a lot about presence as medicine. And if you're willing to be present with whatever's coming up, you're free. That's what I see most people with any kind of addiction, including to work, addiction to activity, addiction to food or alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever it is just a distraction from feeling. Because presence, if you're really, really present, then you have to feel everything. And
I love that. I love it. Presence. What did you call it? Presence as medicine. That, oh my gosh, that's so good. Because, so much of the work that I do as well is around bringing awareness to what we're avoiding. It's just sort of another way of saying the same thing. But it's so true, in the moments when, I'm going to only speak for me personally, but I obviously see it happening within my clients as well and the people I work with, is when you're not present and when you're avoiding that perceived difficult thing, right? Mm-hmm. You're placing a wall up or a resistance. It could be anything. Mm-hmm. You go to these default avoiding things. For me, it might be numbing out with TV or social media or shopping or eating. That was always, as a child, I ate to deal with my empathic nature. So, that's such a good one. Presence is medicine. I love that. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been big for me. Very, very helpful. And I totally get about the food. Chocolate was, always a big one for me.
Yeah. And, just in closing off with this, you on Facebook, you have a group called Empathpreneurs. It's specifically for entrepreneurs who are more empathic in nature. And I'm curious, because I'm obviously an entrepreneur and I'm also an empath. I'm part of the group as well. And I love the content you share there. There's a special something with us, isn't there, with empaths and business? We don't do business the way other people do business. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, yes, it's true. That's how I think about it. I find empaths to be extremely powerful leaders. It's just they're not acknowledged in the world. We have such an extroverted world and ways that people say things are supposed to be, So as an entrepreneur, I got taught a lot of stuff early on when I was getting trained that never fit for me because they just really didn't appeal to my sensitive nature. So there are other ways to do everything is basically my attitude. And you need to find the way that's right for you. And sensitives are very usually tuned into themselves. They usually do know what's right for them. And so things like, internet marketing and funnels and certain kinds of sales strategies. And I learned how to do enrollment conversations that were never a fit for me. I had to come from my heart. I had to really connect with the person, not hold things back. I could go on a long time about the specifics, but pretty much every aspect of business, I believe, can be ultimately a reflection of who you really are. And that's what empaths need. They can't fit into a mold, and they really need to connect deeply with the people that they serve. And so I love to talk about that and teach about that because there's just too much cookie cutter formula stuff going on for empaths to find. It just doesn't work for us.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's fitting it is that analogy of fitting a square peg into a round hole, trying to make yourself or your business or your life work according to these, external standards or ways of doing things that have worked for other people, obviously, they've worked for other people. But, for myself too, I found that whenever I've tried to force myself into another model, whether it was with my upbringing and my family, or whether it was with business, or whether it was with my circle of peers or friends, and it didn't resonate with me. I made myself wrong. I wanted to fit into that mold, but it never, ever worked. It just was so detrimental.
Yeah. And I have a saying too, like, I don't know who, I wish I could credit the source, but I always quote I think it's, I don't know what part of the Bible, it's a line from the Bible that says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And I heard or read somewhere a reinterpretation of that. Like, what exactly does that mean? In modern terms, it means that the gentle, sensitive ones will lead. And if we look around in the world today, we've got a situation in all fronts, whether it's business or politics or any walk of life, you can look and see that we need more humanity, more connection, more sensitivity, more ways of leading from the heart. Mm-hmm. And I really see empaths as being super powerful leaders in that respect, leading their way on their terms and making a huge difference as that. I think it's our time. It's our time to emerge. Oh my
gosh, so powerful. That amazing, powerful, and a great place to kind of like sum up this conversation. Wow. Yeah. Super powerful. The work you're doing in the world is amazing. I love your journey. I know that a lot of women listening are going to be piqued and their interest is going to say, wow, like she came from such a kind of different world into this one. But, it's fascinating to me. And I love it because I sort of grew up, I took a really different, twisted roundabout path. And I used to have this thing in the back of my mind, like, I regret not taking, the corporate road more. And I regret not doing this. I used to have this whole thing going on about that. And I realize now, especially hearing your story and others like you, I realize now that even if I had gone that route, I still would have ended up exactly where I am right now doing this work. So yeah, I saved money on an MBA and I saved all that stuff. But it's interesting because I used to beat myself up about that a lot. And, there's times it still sneaks back in, but it's interesting because when I look at the grand scheme of things, I know that I would have always ended up back here. So I love that you shared that, and thanks so much for being here and having this conversation with us, and for sharing your light with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you for following your soul's truth and for doing this incredible work and knowing, to be able to say, you're in the right place, doing what you're meant to be doing, that all roads would have led you here. That's a very powerful thing to be able to say. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Lisa. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks everyone for listening in. You can find out more about Lisa, as I said, at lisaberkovitz.com. I'll have that in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you guys back next week. Tune into the show then. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Giovanna.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and keep rising, everyone. For books and resources related to today's episode, make sure you head over to sherisespodcast.com, and I'll see you there. If you've enjoyed today's episode, make sure you tune back in next week when I dive into more juicy topics to help make your life the best it can be. And hey, if you've enjoyed listening to the show and you love it, head on over to iTunes and leave me a rate and review and subscribe there to the show.